OB let me know that my blood work came back extremely low on iron. I was super, super anemic. And I thought that it was that first trimester exhaustion, just sort of moving into the second trimester. But it turned out I was, the way pregnancy works, as I'm sure you know, is that the baby takes what the baby needs, and the baby becomes the priority of your body, and whatever's left is just, what you get whatever's left. And I wasn't consuming enough iron, and it was a kind of exhaustion that I had never felt before. And then when I started a super high iron supplement, it was amazing the switch that happened. And then but then post birth, I ended up having to supplement again, and it was just I felt like my brain was working overtime to try to keep up with what my body wasn't able to do. And that was just triple exhausting.
Women are extraordinary. Let's just put that right out there, right?
It's a miracle.
What we endure. And we take care of babies while that's all happening. It's crazy.
I know. Absolutely.
Gabi, let's talk about COVID. COVID fatigue. This is a real thing. We're obviously in a different stage of the pandemic now. We're starting to get out. Many of us, hopefully most of us, are vaccinated. Not all our children, obviously, are vaccinated yet. But this pandemic has brought about prolonged stress for a lot of people, and also intense stress. Apparently, there are two different kinds of stress, prolonged and intense, both of which have long-term effects on our mental health and our physical health. But this is a unique moment in time where we all have experienced something, the pandemic, that has created both prolonged stress and intense stress. So people are tired of being cooped up. They're tired of being careful. They're tired of being scared. They're tired of the uncertainty, and all of that creates fatigue. So I say this to all of our listeners: if you're feeling fatigue, or if you have felt unusually fatigued over the last year and a half or so, 2 years, you're not alone, number one. And because we're in there is no normal anymore. We're in a new abnormal because everything is uncertain. And we haven't been able to do the things that we usually do to cope with stress, or certainly not in the same ways.
Evan has this saying he and a friend kind of came up with together called twice shitty, which is when you feel shitty and then you feel shitty about feeling shitty. And I think what I'm really putting together from everything we're talking about here is that so often the fatigue comes not from the thing that's shitty, but from the feeling shitty about the thing that's shitty. And I know one thing I'm really finding with COVID fatigue is that I'm scared all the time. And that's COVID is terrifying, but then the feelings that I have about COVID are what is so fatiguing. It's so fatiguing to have to do calculus every time I want to take my kid somewhere, or go to the grocery store, or make some sort of a decision. Plus there's all the mental and the emotional relationship tending fatigue, where you have to have these tricky conversations with friends about, well, I'd love to see you, but you haven't gotten the vaccine, so I think we need to do it outside, and worrying about hurting people's feelings. And it's all the feelings about the feelings that for me personally are so depleting.
I completely agree. And I think it's really hard to tease apart what is causing it. If, for instance, you worked out at a gym on a regular basis, and then your gym was closed forever, it seemed, and now your gym might be open, but you don't know when to go, because when are there going to be the correct number of people there? And for instance, locally, I mean, you and I are in the same community. You no longer, if you show that you've been vaccinated, you no longer have to wear a mask in the gym. And I don't know how I feel about that. I still would probably want to wear a mask. I went to the first club to hear live music that I had been to in a year and a half recently, and you had to show proof of vaccination to get into the club. And then it was optional whether you wore a mask or not. And I wore my mask. felt, I don't know these people, and they were sitting too close to me, definitely less than 6 feet. So
we've been so traumatized by, I mean, how are we supposed to, even if there was an official announcement and it was like the pandemic is over, there is no more COVID on this earth, take your masks off, hug and kiss everyone, it's fine. We've been traumatized, as like collectively traumatized for the last 2 years, living in so much fear. I think that the transition back to anything, even if it is safe, or safer or safe-ish, is, I think, going to be its own hurdle. And, because we've been thinking about this monster in the room for so long that, making that jump, I think it's like one thing that's, getting back to this, to our F word of the day, fatigue. Part of what's fatiguing is getting used to thinking about the thing, but now COVID has become part of our daily stress. We've almost gotten used to it, and I think that the hump of changing how we do things is going to be supremely exhausting and challenging for everybody.
One other thing I read about when doing research on COVID fatigue was that, and we all know this, during and immediately after a disaster, people tend to pull together and support one another. The worst event brings out the best in us. But when it goes on and on and on, like COVID has, all that optimism starts to wane, and we start to have negative reactions, and patience wears thin. And there is something called angry resistance. Our people are fighting back against the reality. And so they get angry at the things that the reality is calling for, like wearing masks. Don't tell me to wear a mask. So it isn't just this notion of taking one for the team, but it's I'm angry and I don't know what to do with that anger. So I'm going to resist the things that, like a child would misbehave, right? Adults do the same thing when they're angry and have no healthy outlet for their anger. So I want to leave on a up note, which is how we can cope, because clearly some of our fatigue is out of our control. If we've had surgery, if we've had loss, be it a death or a breakup, if we've given birth, if we've been in an accident and had an injury, you're going to feel fatigue. And if you're going through a global pandemic, like we all are, there's going to be some residual fatigue from that. So how do you cope? What do you do for yourself, Gabi, that helps?
Well, exercise is a big thing for me. As I've talked a little bit about on previous episodes, I've also really been kind of crawling out of this postpartum depression, and it feels not a terrible depression, but one that, just doesn't really feel like me. And it feels very connected to kind of a depression I was feeling earlier on, right after the pandemic started, when I was starting to realize that, things were getting kind of scary and were going to be very different for a long time. And what I have found in both cases is that the number one most self-regulating thing I can do is exercise, running, workout videos, that kind of thing makes a really big difference for me. And of course that seems, it sounds like impossible when we're talking about fatigue, when you're feeling like you can't do anything. But I have found that starting really slowly, going for a 5-10 minute walk often leads to being able to stick it out longer. I have a rule when I'm working out and I don't feel like it, is I always say, I'm just going to do 5 minutes. And often by the end of those 5 minutes, after another 5 minutes, I want to keep going. And I think that would be kind of how I would approach most things that I don't want to do when I'm feeling fatigued. What about you?
So, well, I too will exercise. And first of all, I should say that it is listed as the number one thing to do in order to cope with fatigue. So I have 4 things. And so that's the first one. And I got to say that, Gabi, when we spoke recently, and I don't even remember what the topic was, you were saying that often, maybe it was friendship, when you run, you also are on the phone talking to a friend. And talking is the second thing that helps to alleviate fatigue. Verbalizing what's going on, sharing what we're feeling, listening to someone else, having that interpersonal exchange, and especially for COVID fatigue, when we have been, in many cases, so isolated from our people, that making it a point to connect is another way of really addressing fatigue. The other things, and I do that like all the time. I don't shut up. So I just talk. Another thing that's super helpful, the experts say, is constructive thinking. So it's, we tell ourselves things all the time. We have a narrative that we're telling ourselves over and over again. And often as humans, we get into these thought loops where you suck. You can't do anything. You're incompetent. Why can't you? Why can't you? That is not constructive thinking. Constructive thinking is, like you were just saying, I walked for 5 minutes today. Instead of saying I didn't walk for 20 minutes and I suck, I walked for 5 minutes and that's great. And maybe if I walk for 5 minutes again tomorrow, it'll be actually 7 minutes. And that by the end of next week, I might be up to 10 minutes. That's the difference between negative thinking and constructive thinking. So that makes a really big difference too. And then the fourth thing, which I have to say has helped me enormously in all of my grief, but I really started practicing this in the aftermath of my accident in 2012 and in every situation that has happened since that has caused me pain of one sort or another, which ultimately then led to fatigue. And that is gratitude. Not, oh my God, I'm in so much pain I can't walk. Oh my God, isn't it great that I didn't have a head injury? I don't have a head injury. How amazing is that? I don't need surgery. How amazing is that? Or I need surgery, but then in the aftermath of the surgery, I come to find out that I don't need chemotherapy. Amazing. Focus on what is positive. Focus on the moment, the whole notion of mindfulness, being aware of exactly what you're feeling at the moment, identifying it. When you feel anxious, tune into where in your body you're feeling it, tune right into it. And then amazingly, it dissipates more quickly than if you try to avoid it, cover it up, do something else, So constructive thinking, mindfulness and gratitude, talking and exercising. Those are really the 4. And mindfulness and gratitude are kind of lumped together, but you can call this 5 if you want. But that's the best that I could find online. And I have to say it's backed up by my experience. That is absolutely what has helped me and continues to help me. And I have to practice it every day.
I love that. I need to do more mindfulness stuff. It's one of those things that whenever I am in a practice of trying to be mindful and incorporating it into my life, I get so much benefit. And it's so often the first thing to go when things get tough. So that is a great reminder. And I appreciate you bringing that up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening. It was great to have you here with us on our fatigue episode. We look forward to many more F words.
You can email us if you have questions, comments, ideas for an F word that we should talk about. We are at Gabi and Joanne at gmail.com. That's GABIANDJOANNE at gmail.com. And we'll be back soon with another episode.
And in the meantime, please subscribe to All the F Words. We're available anywhere you get your podcasts. Bye-bye.
Bye.